Hello, welcome back to the channel. My name is Jason. Now, one thing I like to do on this channel is to review products, and one thing I haven't reviewed yet is this thing here, the telescope you often see at the side of me. And so what I thought on this video was have a close look of the Skywatcher 130, and we'll have a little talk about it, pros, cons, why I've got this particular telescope, and would I recommend it. Now, I've owned this telescope for a good three years, over 3 years now, so I've definitely given it a good test. And so let's just a little bit talk about the specs of it, price and such. It's like I say, Skywatcher 130M. Now, the M just simply stands for motor. I'll get to that in a minute. It's a 900 focal length, which gives it a f ratio of around about 6.9. Now, one good thing I can start, and we'll start with the pluses of this particular telescope, is the optics. Now, you know, the optics are the heartbeat of any telescope, and without good optics, it doesn't matter how fancy it looks on the outside. Bad optics mean bad views. It's as simple as that. And what I'm pleased to say in this particular model, they are fantastic for a mass-produced mirror, because you've got to remember that all Skywatcher, Orion, Celestron, all these, they all come from the same manufacturer. They're all the same telescope, basically. And these days, they've got it down to a T, really. To say, like I say, they're not made with any love. They're not hang around like they used to be. It's just a computer and a machine that grinds them out. And they're produced in the thousands. And to say that's how they are producing mirrors these days, you know, I can't fault it. Now, I'm only going on my personal experience with optics in telescopes and that kind of thing. You know, I've not done an actual test. You can do a mirror test to see the purity of the mirror. Never done anything like that. I've just gone from word of mouth and, like I say, my own basic knowledge. Now, with the telescope, you are supplied with a full-size tripod. Now, it's constructed of aluminium. It's built like the traditional style, I suppose, of the old wooden tripod, and it's plenty big enough. I'm 5'11", and you know, I have no trouble getting. In fact, I've never used it fully extended. Something else I like about this telescope, what's included with the telescope, is you get a full metal eyepiece tray, and in actual fact, I mean, people call these, you know, an accessory tray or whatever you want to call it, but with this being all steel and actually connecting with like wing nuts, it really does help with the stability. So, you know, I don't know why they don't always supply telescopes with this these steel trays, because they're far better than the plastic ones. And the reason, you know, metal is better than plastic, it's just that it like I say, it just keeps the entire thing more rigid and secure, where there's a lot more movement in plastic. Now, coming a little bit further up, it's mounted on what's called the EQ2 head. That's just what this particular equatorial head is called. Now, obviously EQ2, I don't know what Skywatcher's on now, probably EQ15 or something. So this is a pretty early one, and it does the job for entry-level telescopes. It's certainly better than the EQ1 in my opinion, and again, it's an all metal construction, which is you know, to be expected, really. And they call these basically GEMS, which just stands for German Equatorial Mount. Now, a little bit further up the tube, the telescope tube itself is mounted on these, again, all metal tube rings. Now, if I can spin this round, maybe show you the other side, and you can see that these just work with these clamps like this. They just come up. It's safe to undo one, don't undo them both and do that, obviously. And obviously, if you undo them both, you can just simply lift the telescope off the mount itself. It's wobbling like that, by the way. It's just because I've not got it fully clamped down on the tripod. So we'll just clamp that back up. Like I say, this is you don't always get this affair. I do personally like tube rings because it's not always a comfortable position for the eyepiece, and you can just simply loosen them off and twist the telescope, you know, to a comfortable viewing position basically. So that's one bonus with these type of tube ring fittings. Now, included with the telescope, you'll also get a red dot finder. My preferred choice of finder, but that's just a personal preference. Some people prefer optical finders. Of course, you can upgrade this to an optical finder if that's your preferred type of finder. But like I say, I love these, and you can't go wrong with red dot finders on these type of telescopes, in my opinion. But that is just my opinion. Now, depending on which package you buy with this telescope, it will depend on whether you get a motor drive with it or not. Now, the one that I don't know if I've mentioned the prices. Have I mentioned the prices? I don't know. I'll mention them again. Well, it's they're about £250 retail, these with the motor. Now, that may vary, £20 either side. Without the motor, you can pick these up as little as £200. Now, like I say, you get all the tripod, the mount, the finder scope. You also get two eyepieces which are included. Now, these are your standard Super 10 and your Super 25. Now, as always, I won't go into this too much. The eyepieces that are provided, like most eyepieces provided with telescopes, they're just to get you going. And it's always best to upgrade just to something a little bit better. The 25, the lower powered one, is a good little eyepiece, to be honest, and that's not really the one you should be worrying about. In fact, the Super 25s, I use them all the time. They're a great little I call them a throw-about eyepiece, and you know, you're not too worried about dropping them and kids putting their fingers all over them and such. So they're a good star party eyepiece. That's probably the word I'm looking for. But as the 10mm eyepiece, that really could do with upgrading to something a little bit better. Back to the motor. Now, the motor, like I say, that will come. You can either buy that separate or you can buy it as a package. Now, this motor is not, let's just get this cleared up, not for astrophotography. It will be okay for basic astrophotography. What this motor is really for is a visual aid. It's going to help you keep objects tracked. If you've never used a telescope before, or if you have used a telescope before, you'll find that, you say you get the moon in the field of view, and you're looking at the moon. You say, oh, hey, come and look at this, and by the time that somebody's come to have a look at it, the moon's moved out of the field of view, and you've got to reset it and the rest of it. This little motor that comes with this telescope, or like I say, if you buy it separate, will just keep that object in the field of view basically. Like I say, you can use it for basic astrophotography. It's accurate up to about, I would say, 6 seconds of exposure or something like that. After that, you're going to start seeing trails. It's just not precise enough. But I'm forgetting something. The motor does come with this as well. A little hand controller. Again, don't get mistaken if you do see this, that it is not a go-to. Okay, this isn't a go-to telescope. It's just simply a motor-driven telescope. All this hand controller does is it helps you either stop the motor, fast forward the motor a little bit, or rewind it a little bit if you like, put it into reverse, so you can just fine-tune it to your needs. Another great little feature, it's also good for our friends in the southern hemisphere, because you've got a north and a south hemisphere switch on there, so it'll work for both sides of the world basically. Now, if you are thinking of buying this model of telescope, I would recommend getting this little motor, because like I say, you get it with the little hand controller, and it's always attached to my telescope. I use it all the time. Oh, by the way, it's powered with a little battery pack that comes included with it. I don't power mine with the battery pack. It is actually 6 volts. I just use it off the mains with a little 6-volt adapter. Really easy to install as well. It works. It's got a little mechanism here where you can engage it and disengage it. It's very basic, but it works. It does the job. And like I say, for visual astronomy, I would recommend the motor. Now, you're probably wondering, what can you see with a telescope like this? Well, if you're new to my channel, or if you're a regular to my channel, anything that you've seen through a telescope, photograph-wise, unless otherwise stated, is through this telescope. You're going to see, obviously the moon looks fantastic through even binoculars, so the moon through a telescope like this is going to look pretty amazing. Planets, it's great for the planets, purely because it's got this 900 focal length. Now, even though more focal length does reduce the actual field of view of telescopes, that's the overall sky you can see when you look through, you are getting that extra kick of magnification. Even though magnification isn't everything in telescope, it's more to do with how much light it can grasp. But with it having that extra few hundred millimeters of focal length, it's going to give you that little bit of boost for the planets, because planets do need quite a lot of magnification. You can do a little bit of deep sky work with it. As always, deep sky work is always limited to your location and your sky conditions, and your light pollution, basically. Excuse me. But some of the, all the brighter deep sky targets, the Andromeda and Orion and things like that, no problem at all. And even the fainter deep sky objects, Ring Nebula, the Dumbbell Nebula, all little targets like this are going to be lovely through a telescope of this size. So they're the good points of this particular telescope. What are the bad points? And unfortunately, folks, there is some of them, and some of them are pretty serious. Well, that's not to say serious, they're just, to me, they scratch my head why there is certain little aspects of this telescope that really displease me. And let's talk about the most serious one, in my opinion, and that is, all these type of telescopes is a Newtonian telescope, so that means it needs to be collimated. Now, collimation is can almost be a bit of a taboo subject, but trust me, collimation is relatively simple. There is a little bit of a learning curve, but once you get to know that learning curve, it's pretty straightforward. Now, on most telescopes, collimation screws, or the adjustment screws, will look something like this. And as you can see, the nice big hefty thumb screws, which means that you need no additional tools. You can do this on site, in the dark, and have no problem at all. And this is where this telescope falls down quite in a big way, really. Plus, this particular telescope has these for adjusting its mirror. Yes, good old-fashioned Phillips-headed screws. Now, I really do scratch my head why such a telescope like this has got such, it's just as though they just said, oh, we'll not bother with proper screws in that one. Just throw them. I've got some spare ones in the box. Yeah, just throw them in there. They'll do. Because let me just explain to you. Like I say, this is a 900 telescope for a start. And when you collimate a telescope, there's various methods. There's laser methods and things. My preferred method is what's called a collimation cap or a Cheshire. Which fits into the eyepiece, and then you have to look through the eyepiece and adjust the mirror at the same time. Now, I've got pretty long arms, and trust me, when you're looking in this telescope and reaching right down the back of it, trying to engage a screwdriver on little Phillips screws in the middle of the night when you're tired, it's just not good, folks. And like I say, I've had this 3 years, and I hate collimating this telescope purely because, it's not difficult because I know how to do it. But for a beginner, for somebody, and don't forget, this telescope is classed as an entry-level telescope. I just don't think it is an entry-level telescope, purely on the collimation system of how, just by falling down on some simple thumb screws. I mean, how much extra would it be? Instead of £250, it might be £252 just for that addition of decent collimation thumb screws. Now, the other bugbear of mine is at the start of the video, I did mention how everything everything on this telescope is made of, constructed out of metal or steel or whatever you want to call it. Which is always a good thing in a telescope, especially a telescope, because, they need to be as solid as they can be. But if we move up to this focuser, is another big letdown on this telescope. We've got everything in metal, everything, the tube, even the top of the focuser is metal, but this entire housing and the tube is plastic. And I mean cheap, inferior plastic, cheap enough that this is broke and needs replacing. Now, I do use my telescope quite a lot, obviously, but how it's broke is the teeth have simply just got shredded off. I've now modded this focuser into a friction focuser, so it doesn't actually work on the it's like a little cog. Trying to think, rack and pinion. That's the word I'm looking for. This is more on a friction wheel now, and it does hold okay. I mean, I wouldn't trust a camera on it or anything like this, but this is just to tide me over until I can replace this focuser. Again, for such a nice telescope, which has excellent optics in it for the money, to put a focuser like this on and these collimation screws, just makes me scratch my head a little. And I mean, I don't expect anything flash, because obviously focusers can be very expensive, but just a metal housing, the same metal that everything else is made of, because this won't be like, the finest steel in the world, would just be something. I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? You've got like a metal cog here against plastic teeth. Yeah, I mean, metal and plastic under tension, it's just a recipe for disaster. And and I just don't understand why Skywatcher did that. But apart from the focuser, apart from the collimation, is this telescope recommended? Yes. I mean, I wouldn't have had it for this long now without it being of some use. But I wouldn't recommend it for the absolute beginner. Like I say, this is classed as a beginner telescope, an entry-level telescope, but I think it's one step above that. Purely on the fact that it's on an equatorial mount. It's not on a Dobsonian mount. There's a learning curve there. You're going to have a learning curve with the collimation, and the collimation is going to be a bit of a nightmare to learn on this. The plus side of this is, if you are a total novice and you've never owned a telescope before, and you do use this as your learning telescope, the rest of the telescopes you come across are going to be a breeze, and you're going to say, why, you'll understand why didn't they put those type of collimation screws in there. Or if you have had some experience with a telescope, then I would recommend this. Now you know what to expect. You're not going to be so totally disappointed. But a bit of basic knowledge with this telescope is certainly going to help you when you first, getting to learn the ropes, if you like. I must mention also about one more bugbear about this scope that I haven't mentioned yet, and that is the slow motions on it. Now, the slow motions are these antennae here. I don't know if they're on shot. I'll put a photograph up if they're not on shot. Now, you get two slow motion controls. You get one that comes down the length of the tube, and another one that sticks out of the side of the tube here. Now, my telescope hasn't got that on, and I took it off. Well, I never put it on since I had the telescope. You've got this big thing sticking out that you're constantly walking into in the dark. It's so bad. And the other thing is, your telescope, I don't know if I've got this high enough, at certain positions, if you're moving this round, will hit it. Why the telescope moving? Well, it's hitting the slow motion controls. Really bad design. And while we're on it, we can talk about the design of the motor. Something I forgot to mention when we were talking about the cons of this thing. As you can see, the design of the motor, pretty much, it sticks out quite a lot. But what makes this even worse is this, the hand controller. because once we plug this in, by the way, it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, what is it, 6 pin, one of those things like they used to have in old PCs. If we help it, let me just put my glasses on, guys. I'm able to see what I'm doing then. Yeah, if we put this in that way around, there we go. Now we've plugged it in. Can you see the problem already? I mean, there's a good 6-inch of protrusions there, and you can see the problem straight away what we're going to get when we're at high up in the sky and we're coming round. Boom, this is what's going to happen. And now, admittedly, not going to have it orientated like that all the time. You know, this problem of it hitting the motor only happens occasionally, but it does happen, and it's really frustrating, and it shouldn't happen, and it's purely on a bad design. But I maybe should have started with the cons before I started with the pros, actually, because I'm kind of making out that this telescope, it's got so many frustrations it's not worth it, but it hasn't. As a telescope, like I say, I've owned it for 3 years, and I probably won't ever get rid of it. I love it. It's a great little telescope, apart from its grey areas. But they're not something that's going to totally ruin the telescope. Like I say, there's certain things that can be upgraded. The focuser can certainly be upgraded. The collimation screws can be upgraded. You can buy them separate, you know, aftermarket screws quite easily. I've just never done it because that's another plus about this telescope. It does hold its collimation really, really well. In fact, it's one of the best telescopes I've had of holding its collimation. Very rare do I have to alter the collimation, so that's one bonus of it. Now, if you are thinking of buying one of these telescopes, I would strongly advise looking around on the second-hand market. That's where this one come from. Now, I was on the market for an 8-inch or maybe a 10-inch Dobsonian. That's what I was looking for. And while scouting round through telescopes, this came up on the listings for a priceless sum of £70. Now, that was everything included. That was the motor, the eyepieces, a Barlow lens, everything I've mentioned here for £70. And I just couldn't let that go. You know, it's never been used. It was one of those unwanted gifts, I think. You know, somebody once probably mentioned, I want a telescope, got it bought from and used it once. And it was, you know, pretty much brand new when I got it. You could tell it had very little use. So just hunt around on the second-hand market when going for telescopes. But the only bit of advice I would say about that is it's always a good idea if you can get to go and see the telescope. Remember, these are scientific instruments at the end of the day. There's a lot of glass in them, whether it's a refractor or a reflector, and that's the main part. They can get damaged quite easily, and you know, unfortunately not everybody's as honest as they should be when it comes to selling second-hand goods. But I managed to, it was only over the hill, about 10 miles over the hill, luckily enough, and I went and had a look at it and just thought, well, how can I turn that down for £70? You know, I was looking for a telescope, like I say, at the time. It's not as big as I want it, but I don't want anything bigger than an 8-inch reflector, purely because, and that's something else you want to consider when buying a telescope. Don't go for something massive, even if you can afford it. If you live in an incredibly dark location with bottle, you know, 4 below skies, then go for big telescopes. The problem is, if you live in a small town, city, something like that, you're just never going to get to use it. Remember, a telescope gathers light. That's what a telescope does. It doesn't magnify an image. And if you've got an incredible amount of light pollution, that means it's gathering all that light pollution as well, and you're not going to have a chance to get to use the telescope to its full potential, where you know, you need to have it in dark skies, basically. So usually for suburban astronomy, 8-inch, you want to be looking no bigger than 10-inch. This is probably a little bit on the small side for what I wanted it for. Like I say, I said it in my mind, you know, minimum 6, maximum 10, but you know, 5 1/4 inches will do for now. That doesn't sound right, does it? We'll leave it in. I'll take a risk. So there you go, folks. I've finally done a review of my telescope, the Skywatcher 130M. Now, if you do own one of these telescopes and you're having any problems with it, any issues, just put your question in the comments below, and I try my best to answer every single question that people ask me. And I do apologise for anybody that has left me any comments and I haven't got back to you. Some do slip the net. Don't ask me why. I don't know if it's something to do with YouTube's algorithm or what. That these days I have to check every video that I've uploaded because I don't always get notifications for comments. So I apologize if you do have a question and it doesn't get answered in the comments. There's another option you can go for if you're not aware of our Facebook group. Come and join that. You'd be more than welcome. There's people of all levels there, and that's basically what I love it for on Facebook is newbies can come in and ask questions, because there's a lot of experienced people on there as well as a lot of newbies on there, so you're not going to feel uncomfortable. So like I say, Facebook link in the description below. Well, that's it for this one, folks. Thank you so much for watching if you've watched this far. Don't forget, if you haven't subscribed already, hit that subscribe button and the notifications bell, because I do regular uploads for the new astronomer. In the meantime, folks, take good care of yourselves, and I will see you on the next one. Bye for now.